In the dark heart of modern financial history, there exists a name that echoed like thunder through global markets: Sam Bankman-Fried, known simply as SBF, a disheveled prodigy in worn sneakers who built an empire valued at $32 billion on foundations made of lies, encrypted code, and hollow promises. A story that begins with the unbridled ambition of a brilliant MIT graduate and ends in one of the largest fraud cases in American history. Sentenced to 25 years in prison for orchestrating a scheme that diverted billions of dollars from innocent clients who trusted their life savings to a platform that appeared revolutionary but was actually a carefully constructed illusion. A digital house of cards waiting for the inevitable collapse that would shake the entire cryptocurrency industry to its core and expose the dangerous intersection between genius, greed, and the intoxicating power of unchecked wealth. Sam Bankman-Fried was born into privilege and intellect, the son of two Stanford Law School professors, Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried. Raised in the comfortable bubble of academic excellence where success was not just expected but assumed, a childhood filled with logic puzzles and philosophical debates that shaped a mind capable of processing complex mathematical problems with frightening speed. Graduating from MIT with a physics degree before diving into the world of quantitative trading at Jane Street Capital, where he learned the algorithms and strategies that would later become the weapons of his financial empire. But something darker stirred beneath the surface of this brilliant young man: an obsession with effective altruism, a philosophical movement that argued for making as much money as possible to donate to charitable causes, a noble-sounding principle that would become the twisted justification for one of history's most audacious frauds. Because in Sam's mind, the ends always justified the means, and if stealing billions could theoretically save millions, then perhaps the crime wasn't really a crime at all, a rationalization that would poison everything he touched. In 2017, Sam founded Alameda Research, a quantitative cryptocurrency trading firm that exploited price differences across global exchanges, making millions through arbitrage strategies that seemed almost magical in their profitability. Capitalizing on the chaotic early days of crypto, when Bitcoin could trade for $8,000 on one exchange and $10,000 on another, a gold rush mentality that attracted brilliant mathematicians and programmers who believed they were building the future of finance. And for a brief moment, they were right. Alameda was printing money, generating profits that seemed impossible by traditional standards, and Sam became known in crypto circles as a genius trader, the boy wonder who could see patterns where others saw only chaos, his reputation growing with each successful trade, each mathematical model that predicted market movements with uncanny accuracy. But beneath the success, a dangerous culture was forming, one where rules were seen as obstacles, regulations as annoyances, and traditional financial safeguards as outdated relics of a system too slow and stupid to understand the revolutionary potential of cryptocurrency. Then came 2019, the birth of FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange that Sam promised would be different, safer, more professional than the Wild West exchanges that had come before, with a sleek interface, institutional-grade security, and a charismatic founder who spoke the language of Silicon Valley disruption, attracting investors like Sequoia Capital, SoftBank, and Singapore's Temasek, who poured billions into a company they believed would become the next financial giant, the Goldman Sachs of crypto. And Sam played the part perfectly, appearing on stages at prestigious conferences, giving interviews where he spoke about regulation and responsibility, wearing his trademark shorts and wrinkled t-shirt as if to say he was too focused on building the future to care about appearances, a calculated image of the absent-minded genius who was too busy changing the world to bother with vanity. And the strategy worked brilliantly. FTX grew at a pace that seemed almost supernatural, reaching a valuation of $32 billion in just 3 years, making Sam one of the richest people on Earth before his 30th birthday. A modern Midas whose touch turned everything to gold, or so it appeared to the outside world that had no idea what was happening behind the encrypted chat logs and deleted code. But here is where the story turns truly dark, where ambition crosses the line into criminality, because from the very beginning, FTX was built on a lie. A fundamental deception that would eventually consume everything. Sam had created a backdoor between FTX and Alameda Research, a secret passage that allowed Alameda to borrow billions of dollars in customer funds from the exchange without permission, without collateral, without any of the safeguards that legitimate financial institutions require. Customer money that people believed was safely held in their accounts was actually being funneled to Alameda to make increasingly risky trades, to cover losses, to invest in speculative ventures that had nothing to do with cryptocurrency trading. And when those trades went bad, when the market turned against Alameda's positions, the losses weren't absorbed by the trading firm, but by the customers of FTX who had no idea their money was being gambled away, a scheme so brazen that it defies comprehension. Imagine depositing your life savings in a bank only to discover the bank secretly lent your money to the owner's hedge fund to make risky bets on the stock market. That is essentially what Sam did, except the amounts involved were not thousands or millions, but billions of dollars, an ocean of wealth that disappeared into the black hole of Alameda's failing trades. Caroline Ellison, Sam's on-and-off girlfriend and the CEO of Alameda Research, knew everything. She understood the fraud from the inside, participating in the decisions that would ultimately destroy thousands of lives, and when she finally testified against Sam in court, her words painted a picture of casual criminality, of a workplace where stealing customer funds was discussed as casually as ordering lunch, where the ethical implications of their actions were waved away with pseudo-philosophical arguments about effective altruism and the greater good. She described how Sam directed her to take billions from FTX customers, how he showed no remorse, no hesitation, no moral struggle with the magnitude of what they were doing. And perhaps most chilling, she revealed that Sam had considered paying up to $8 billion in bribes to Chinese officials to unfreeze Alameda accounts, a staggering sum that demonstrated just how deep the corruption ran, how completely Sam had abandoned any pretense of legality or ethics in his desperate attempts to keep the scheme alive, to maintain the illusion of success, even as the foundation crumbled beneath him. The collapse, when it finally came in November 2022, was swift and brutal, triggered by a report from CoinDesk that revealed suspicious financial ties between FTX and Alameda, showing that Alameda's balance sheet was heavily weighted with FTT, FTX's own cryptocurrency token, essentially worthless collateral that had been used to prop up both companies in an elaborate circular scheme. Binance and CEO Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, immediately announced his company would sell its FTT holdings, sparking a run on FTX as customers rushed to withdraw their funds. And that's when the horrifying truth emerged. FTX didn't have the money. Billions of dollars that should have been in customer accounts had vanished, stolen to cover Alameda's losses, used to buy luxury real estate in the Bahamas, donated to political campaigns to buy influence, invested in speculative ventures that had nothing to do with the exchange's core business. Within days, FTX filed for bankruptcy, revealing a hole in the balance sheet that would eventually be estimated at more than $8 billion. $8 billion of customer money that had simply disappeared. And with it, the life savings of hundreds of thousands of people around the world who had trusted Sam's promises of safety and security. The human cost of Sam's fraud is almost impossible to comprehend. Ordinary people who believed they were investing in the future of finance suddenly discovered their accounts were empty, their retirement funds gone, their children's college savings evaporated. Some victims lost everything: homes, businesses, dreams, crushed under the weight of Sam's casual criminality. And throughout the trial, these victims testified, telling stories that brought jurors to tears, describing the devastation of watching years of careful savings disappear overnight, the shame of having to tell family members they'd been fooled, the despair of facing old age without the security they'd worked their entire lives to build. And through it all, Sam showed almost no emotion, sitting in court with the same blank expression he'd worn during his days as FTX's CEO, as if he couldn't quite understand what all the fuss was about, as if the suffering of thousands of people was just an unfortunate side effect of his grand ambitions, a philosophical problem to be debated rather than a moral catastrophe he had personally created. The trial itself was a masterclass in the prosecution of white-collar crime, federal prosecutors methodically building their case with testimony from Sam's closest associates, people like Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, the co-founder and chief technology officer of FTX, and Nishad Singh, the director of engineering, all of whom had pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate. Their testimonies were devastating, describing in detail how Sam had orchestrated the fraud, how he had lied to investors, customers, and regulators with a brazenness that shocked even experienced prosecutors. The evidence included encrypted chat logs where Sam and his inner circle discussed the theft of customer funds as if they were planning a weekend trip, coding notes that showed how the backdoor between FTX and Alameda had been deliberately created and hidden from auditors. Financial records that proved billions had been misappropriated, and perhaps most damning, Sam's own statements, because even after his arrest, even after the evidence had mounted to overwhelming levels, Sam couldn't stop talking, giving interviews where he claimed ignorance, where he suggested the whole thing was just a terrible misunderstanding, a series of accounting errors rather than deliberate fraud, a defense so absurd that it actually hurt his case more than helping it. When the verdict came down, guilty on all 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy, the courtroom was silent. Sam showed no visible reaction. His parents sobbed quietly in the gallery, and the prosecutors allowed themselves a moment of satisfaction, knowing they had secured one of the most significant fraud convictions in American history. But the sentencing was still to come. And when Judge Lewis Kaplan finally handed down 25 years in federal prison, he made clear that Sam's crimes were not victimless, not abstract financial manipulations, but deliberate theft that had destroyed lives. The judge rejected the defense's attempts to minimize the harm, rejected the argument that most customers would eventually be repaid through bankruptcy proceedings, because that repayment, if it comes, will be based on the value of cryptocurrency at the time of the bankruptcy, not the much higher values that many customers' holdings had reached, meaning they will receive only a fraction of what they lost and beyond. The financial harm, there was the betrayal of trust, the damage done to an entire industry that was already struggling for legitimacy, the message sent to the world that crypto was nothing more than a playground for fraudsters and con artists. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Sam Bankman-Fried's story is not the fraud itself, but the mindset that enabled it. This was not a desperate criminal backed into a corner. This was a privileged young man who had every advantage in life: brilliant parents, elite education, access to capital and connections that most people can only dream of. And he chose to steal, not out of necessity, but out of a twisted philosophy that convinced him he was special, that normal rules didn't apply to someone pursuing the greater good. Effective altruism, the movement Sam claimed to embrace, was supposed to be about doing the most good with one's resources. But in Sam's hands, it became a justification for doing harm, for stealing billions because he believed he could use that money better than the people he stole it from, a God complex disguised as humanitarian concern. And this rationalization is perhaps more dangerous than simple greed because it allows the criminal to see himself as a hero, to believe that the fraud is actually a form of charity, that the victims are collateral damage in a noble quest to save the world. The FTX collapse sent shockwaves through the entire cryptocurrency industry. Billions of dollars in market value evaporated as investors fled to safety. Other exchanges faced runs as customers questioned whether their funds were actually safe. Regulators around the world used the scandal as evidence that crypto needed stricter oversight, and the dream of decentralized finance free from government control seemed more distant than ever. Sam had not just destroyed his own company, he had set back an entire movement, poisoning the well for legitimate entrepreneurs trying to build the future of finance. And the irony is almost too perfect. The man who claimed to be building a better financial system, who spoke about transparency and responsibility, had actually created something far more corrupt than the traditional institutions he claimed to replace. At least traditional banks have audits, regulatory oversight, deposit insurance, systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of fraud Sam committed so easily. Now, as Sam begins his 25-year sentence in federal prison, the cryptocurrency world is left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild trust, to prove that the technology itself has value even if some of its most prominent advocates were criminals, and the victims of his fraud are left with empty accounts, broken dreams, and the bitter knowledge that they trusted someone who saw them not as customers or people but as resources to be exploited, numbers on a spreadsheet to be moved around in service of his grand ambitions. And perhaps that is the darkest truth of all, that Sam Bankman-Fried never saw. What he did is theft. Even now, sitting in prison, he likely believes he was trying to do good, that his intentions somehow excuse his actions, that the billions he stole were justified by the charitable donations he planned to make, a delusion so complete that it survives even the overwhelming evidence of the harm he caused, even the testimony of his victims, even the 25-year sentence that will consume the prime years of his life. Because in the end, the greatest trick Sam Bankman-Fried ever pulled was not fooling investors or customers or regulators, it was fooling himself, convincing himself that he was the hero of this story when he was always, from the very beginning, the villain.